Long ago in the region surrounding Nevşehir and Kayseri in central Turkey, an ancient people built, or rather dug, over 200 underground cities. The deepest of these, under the present-day town of Derinkuyu, delves over 250 feet below the Earth's surface and boasts numerous tunnels, halls, meeting rooms, wells, and passages. Because the city was carved from existing caves and underground structures that had first formed naturally, there is no way to discern with traditional archaeological methods of dating when exactly Derinkuyu was built. As such, and with ties to the Hittites, Phrygians, and Persians, Derinkuyu presents a fascinating riddle for ancient mystery enthusiasts. Derinkuyu is located in the Cappadocia region of Turkey, a place renowned for its unique geology. At the dawn of time, volcanoes in the area covered it with a thick layer of ash. Over the years, this ash transformed into a soft rock that itself eroded over the eons, leaving an exotic landscape of pocketed spires, columns, and rough pyramids referred to by the locals as castles. Perhaps inspired by their surroundings, ancient people began to carve the soft ash rock into tunnels and rooms to be used as residences, storage, stables, and religious temples. Cappadocia boasts a number of fascinating carved sites, including the churches and refectories at Garim, the Roman-made castle at Uchisa, and the largest underground city in the region, Kaymakli. The latter has been inhabited continuously since its construction, and people today still use it for storage and even stables. Derinkuyu seems to attract the most attention of all the underground cities because until 1963, modern people were unaware that this deepest of the underground cities even existed. As for specifics, the underground city at Derinkuyu has 18 stories that descend far into the earth. Sophisticated shafts, some as long as 180 feet, provide ventilation to the complex's multitude of residences, communal rooms, tunnels, wine cellars, oil presses, stables, and chapels. The city also has numerous wells to provide fresh water, so many that most scholars agree that Derinkuyu could have easily supported as many as 20,000 people. It is widely presumed that the city was part of a larger complex. In support of this, many point to a commonly believed rumor that a tunnel extends from Derinkuyu to its sister underground city, Kaymakli, some 3 miles away. Conventional wisdom holds that these cities were built for the same reasons other people built citadels and castles, to protect the populace during invasion. Some of the strongest evidence to support this theory includes the self-contained freshwater supply, as well as the enormous stone circular doors weighing up to 1,000 pounds that could seal off passageways from invaders. Derinkuyu had been lost to time until during renovations on a modern home, an opening to a cave passage was revealed. Although visitors have been allowed in the underground city since 1965, many passages and rooms still remain inaccessible. So, who built this city? Unfortunately, there is no consensus on who built Derinkuyu or when construction first began. Some suggest that the earliest construction started with the Hittites in the 15th century BC. The Anatolian Hittites, distinct from the group described in the Christian Bible, controlled a large portion of Asia Minor, extending from the Black Sea to the Levant. Cappadocia and Derinkuyu were smack in the middle of their territory. Throughout their history, the Hittites faced a variety of enemies, including the Egyptians, the Assyrians, and the Thracians, a group of loosely affiliated tribes from southeastern Europe. In the 12th century BC, the Thracians destroyed the Hittites' main city of Hattusa, and many believe the Hittites used Derinkuyu as a shelter during that onslaught. They support this theory with a small number of Hittite-related artifacts, including a statue of a lion found on the site. Others are not convinced of a Hittite origin and point instead to the Phrygians. One of the Thracian tribes that sacked Hattusa around 1180 BC, the Phrygians controlled the region until approximately the 6th century BC, when they were conquered by the Persian host under Cyrus the Great. Archaeologists consider Phrygians' architects among the finest of the Iron Age, and they were known to have engaged in large, complex construction projects. One of their most well-known works was the sophisticated Great Citadel at Gordian, built between 950 and 800 BC. Because they are known to have possessed the necessary architectural skills and inhabited the region for such a long time, many credit the Phrygians with creating Derinkuyu. These experts place the first construction on the complex to sometime between the 10th and 7th centuries BC. Moving on from there, the second chapter of Vendedat, a section of the Zoroastrian book Avesta, includes the story of how the great and mythical Persian king Yima created places underground to house flocks, herds, and men. Relying on this, some opine that Derinkuyu was built by ancient Persians, since the Avesta dates the founding of Zoroastrianism 1500 to 1200 BC. Persian construction on the site would have to have predated any construction done by the Hittites. Although intriguing because the Venedad makes no clear link with Derinkuyu, this theory has little mainstream support. Regardless of who built it, later generations have inhabited it. Many believe early Christians used the underground cities of Cappadocia, including Derinkuyu, as a place to hide from Roman persecution. In support of this claim, they point to the fact that St. Gregory and St. Basil had both presided in Cappadocia during the 4th century AD. Surprisingly, the ancient people of Anatolia weren't alone in their love of underground living. Like the Hittites and Christians hiding from their enemies, the people of Moose Jaw, Saskatchewan built a network of tunnels and residences to hide the town's Chinese immigrants from persecution in the early 20th century. Later, smugglers reportedly used the underground city during Prohibition to hide their illicit wares from law enforcement. In France, the last inhabitants of the village Troglodytique de Berry, an underground community that dated back to the 6th century AD, were forced to abandon their homes just a few years ago when their houses began to fall down around them. According to reports, a few people died before the last inhabitants were convinced to leave. Today in Montreal, Quebec, an entire complex of underground trains and tunnels connects residents and visitors to shopping centers, exhibition halls, office towers, movie theaters, and even an indoor ice rink. And now for a bonus fact. Speaking of underground awesome, hidden just below the landscape of modern Vietnam, localized mostly in the Chu Chi district of Ho Chi Minh, exists an expansive series of tunnels that at their peak spiderwebbed from what was then known as Saigon to the country's border near Cambodia. During the Vietnam War, these multi-level tunnels were utilized so effectively by the Viet Cong forces that American troops had to resort to leveling the area of Chu Chi with artillery, which did little more than annoy the many thousands of troops and civilians hidden safely underground. Initially built by hand in the late 1940s by communist forces wanting to repel French colonists during Vietnam's War for Independence, at first the tunnels began simply as hiding places for guerrilla forces. But thanks to their tactical advantage, workers soon focused on aggressively expanding the tunnels until the end of the conflict with the French. The tunnels remained dormant until the start of the Vietnam War, when guerrilla forces found and began expanding them once again, creating a sprawling network comprised of hundreds of kilometers of multi-storied tunnels that went as much as 40 feet, 12 meters underground. The majority of these were located below the district of Chu Chi, hence the name Chu Chi Tunnels. At the height of the Vietnam War, this underground stronghold contained everything from kitchens to theaters, where they showed, according to the BBC, politically motivating plays. In addition to this, they contained bomb shelters, hospitals, and ammunition stores, allowing Viet Cong forces to move supplies about the jungles of Vietnam virtually unchallenged. As for how to access the tunnels and how they handled ventilation, countless hidden trapdoors were placed across the jungle, allowing the Viet Cong to melt into the undergrowth and launch surprise attacks against unsuspecting soldiers, even inside of American bases. To help prevent soldiers from finding and using these entrances to the tunnels, they also built dummy entrances that were booby-trapped in various ways, including with explosives, while the actual entrances were disguised as things like termite mounds and bushes. In the rare events an enemy soldier found an entrance that wasn't booby-trapped, few dared to venture into them for a number of reasons. The first, and most pertinent, was that many Western soldiers were simply too big to fit inside of the entrances, which were deliberately made as small as possible. In the event a soldier could fit, the tunnels were pitch black, often purposefully built, very short and narrow, and filled with critters like scorpions and venomous centipedes and snakes. Beyond the charming local wildlife, a soldier could expect to find countless hidden booby traps with things like punji pits, sharpened bamboo sticks hidden in pits, venomous snake-filled containers designed to drop from overhead, and poison gas. That's not to mention the very real possibility of encountering enemy soldiers or simply getting lost in the tunnels. As a result of all of this, in the early days of the Vietnam War, the extent of the tunnels was largely unknown and underappreciated. This isn't to say that enemy forces weren't aware of them. In fact, it was quite the opposite, and they launched two massive campaigns to destroy them. The most famous of these was a joint operation between the US and Australia called Operation Crimp. One aim of the campaign was to flush out the Viet Cong forces hiding below ground and shut down or crimp off the entrances to the tunnels. Beginning in January of 1966, the campaign began with a massive bombing of the Chu Chi area, turning what was once a lush jungle into burning wasteland. This did little to disturb the literally deeply entrenched Viet Cong, though being forced to remain for lengthy periods in the critter-filled tunnels must have made life rather difficult. After the bombings, ground forces began searching for the tunnels. In the case of American troops, whenever a tunnel entrance was found, the modus operandi was to seal it with a grenade, then continue searching for other entrances. Nobody wanted to go in the tunnels. Except the Aussies, that is. A group of Australian troops decided to carefully search the underground infrastructure to see just what they contained. Led by one Captain Sandy McGregor, they began to exhaustively map out the tunnels, finding ammunition, medical supplies, and dozens of hidden Viet Cong soldiers. Their efforts revealed for the first time the truly massive scope of the network. It was around this time that several other specialized teams of soldiers were created to map and destroy the tunnels. The most famous of these are arguably the Tunnel Rats, a volunteer volunteer force comprised mostly of American, Australian, and New Zealand soldiers. Given that some parts of the tunnels were barely large enough to crawl through, the tunnel rats were generally particularly small individuals who, by necessity of space, went in armed with only a standard-issue .45 pistol, a flashlight, and a knife. Needless to say, the tunnel rats proceeded extremely slowly in the pitch black, crawling along searching for traps at every turn while attempting to keep their presence a secret. While these soldiers did their job well, the tunnel system was simply too massive to make even this approach particularly effective, and the Viet Cong fought tooth and nail to defend their critical underground network when they did find enemy troops inside. In the end, these tunnels are largely considered to be one of the reasons the conflict in Vietnam lasted as long as it did, and their sheer size and reach allowed the Viet Cong to essentially dictate when and where many pitched battles took place in the so-called Iron Triangle. The Viet Cong continued to use the tunnels right up until the end of the Vietnam conflict in 1975, never mind the years of near-constant carpet bombing. Despite all efforts to destroy the tunnels, well over 100 kilometers still exist below Chu Chi alone, where certain safer sections have, in parts, been made much larger to serve as both a popular tourist attraction and as a cultural monument. So I really hope you found that video interesting. If you did, please do hit that thumbs up button below. Don't forget to subscribe. Brand new videos every day of the week. And as always, thank you for watching.